as you can see, I'm sitting in my car. This right now is my safe place. My internet isn't so too great out here, so I'm using the phone to connect to the internet. It's my first time trying it, so I
Oh,
guess it
no,
is working.
it's working like a charm. I can hear you really clearly. So,
Good,
The
good.
audio sounds quite good from here, to be honest,
Mm.
actually.
So the audio inside the car can is really good because you get no echo. It's all
yeah.
been it's all been sucked up by the the linings in the car. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
sounding good, bruv.
Oh, I might try that myself next time.
yeah. It actually does work very well.
Hello, and welcome to the Full Stop Podcast, a Childless community podcast with Michael Hughes, Berenice Smith, and me, Sarah Lawrence. If you're new to this podcast, we're here to delve beneath the surface of the childless identity, to cover what's going on in the wider community, and to look at the topics that really affect us. Our goal is to help and support those of you out in the community by sharing the stories and the voices that make up our narrative, so that you too can begin to find yours. We also aim to inform and educate those who aren't members of our community so that they can begin to understand and support those people in their lives who are facing a life without children. In this episode, we were lucky enough to be joined by Ken Fenton and Lisa Ann Cassane, who are both members of the childless community but who are also step-parents. If you're a long-term listener, you might very well recognise both of their voices from previous episodes. Lisa from episode 23, Making Connections, and Ken from episode 14, Clan of Brothers. It was great to have them both back on, talking about something that many of us really don't know enough about. As Lisa says in this episode, they span the two communities, parents and non-parents, but this can cause problems in and of itself. This is a really informative episode that helps us learn more about how tough it can be caring for other people's children while not being able to have our own.
Today, to talk about step parenting, because it's been asked a lot. Actually, this is quite a subject that we've been asked to talk about quite often. It affects quite a lot of people in our community, but somehow doesn't get talked about a great deal, and certainly hasn't been on the podcast before. The Full Stop has not done this before, so this is a bit of a new area for us, and we're very much kind of led by where you'd like us to take the conversation, and we're interested to hear about it, because I think from my side, I think there's that kind of quite a few myths I think that need to be busted. There's the whole kind of, obviously all that stuff in fairy tales, aren't there, about childlessness and wicked step parents. It's a perennial thing, isn't it, in the Grimm brothers. And also the idea that if you're a step parent, you've kind of got a family. And that also, I'm sure, is as well. And I'm just wondering if you'd like to kind of take it away, Lisa. I know you're not feeling 100% with tonsillitis, so speak as little and as much as you want to, and take good care of your voice.
Thank you. Yeah, I just really wanted to be here because it is something that's really close to my heart. And as you say, there's this whole spectrum of what being a step parent as a childless person means. I personally became a step parent when the children were 7 and 10. That was 10 years ago. They're now sort of going into adulthood. But then there's lots of people who become step parents later on or earlier on. So it varies so much. And yeah, I think what we're saying about the evil stepmother tropes, it's just rife. And it's almost like I fall into the gaps because I'm not quite childless, because I do have these children that are in my life, and that I sort of have a parental sort of relationship with, but then I very much don't have children and I'm very much not the parent. So I find it difficult, and I have found it difficult a lot, to know where my place is in childlessness, in parenting, in the world, really. And it's just one of those things that, yeah, I still don't think I've quite found that place, but the childless community is certainly one of the most accepting. It's certainly more accepting to me than the parenting community, let's put it that way. So yeah, I suppose that's a little bit of an intro for me. I'm going to rest my voice and let Ken talk now, I think.
Gee, thanks. Yeah, I've been a step parent now for 38 years. When I married my wife, her kids were already grown and out of the house. so it wasn't like dealing with little kids or anything like that. Um, and but it's a different thing. I mean, I know everybody knows the you know what it's like not to have your own kids. You just from everything going on at work and what you see every day. But it's like you also have it at home every day. You even though they're not living there, there's her kids are coming over, say, and and you see the smile on her face when they walk in the door, and hi, hon, and all the different things come. Not only what you see every day, it's what but when you come home, when you almost feel like you'll be in that safe area where you can get a break from some of that stuff, it don't stop, because they're coming over, they're calling on the phone, and you see and hear the happy tone in my wife's voice when they talk to him and all, and it's another reminder that you'll never have that, you'll never feel that joy of seeing someone that, well, is part of you, actually, in a way. Of course, I know the two big holidays during the year, the Mother and Father's Day, is difficult for everybody, but you also have that added thing, like on those days, say Mother's Day, her kids come over. She has two. They come over the house and bring the gift and whatever, flowers and things, and of course the conversation usually always gets into when they were young, something they did, or uh, uh, silly things they did, annoying things they did, and the other thing is each of her kids have two, so then it branches out into that, and I sometimes just feel like I'm sitting there like the biggest fool, at times. Like I don't know what to say. I'm just an innocent bystander that doesn't have any input, nothing to say, nothing to add to the conversation. Uh, so it's lonely. Well, I know it is for everybody in our situation, but yeah, you feel very left out and not part of the whole thing. Again, in another instance, another way.
Ken, I think what you've said about being a grandparent or having grandchildren is really interesting, because my stepson, who's 20, his girlfriend is now pregnant. They're expecting their first child, and it was. I felt so honoured that they told me, and they were really, really sensitive about it. They knew my struggles, and they came to me and said, we're going to have a baby, and I was so thrilled for them, but underneath that I was absolutely heartbroken all over again, because when
Yeah.
my husband so I actually got told before my husband, which was probably a bit naughty, but he came home and then they told him, and his face just lit up, and I have never seen him so happy, and it brought it all back, how I would never make him look like that, how that would never be a result of anything I could say to him, and so I had to swallow all of the hurt and all of the pain, and I had to
Yes,
be
yes.
happy for them, and I am happy for them, and
Right,
I always feel like you need to qualify that, don't you, because of course I'm happy,
right.
but also, oh my
Yes,
God, it's heartbreaking. And I've got that coming now. In a few months' time, there's going to be a little baby around. And I just know that it's going to bring it all up. And yes, I might be a grandparent, but I'm not the grandparent. I'm not the one that can tell them about who their ancestors are, or any of those kind of things. So it's just another step, another barrier, I suppose, that gets put in, that just reminds me, like you say, that I'm just an outsider, really.
yeah, yeah. I know. I felt the same exact thing. It's it. I just well, okay. Like you said, another one coming. Yeah. Well, I just found out there's another one coming due the end of this year. I think around August or something like that. In the family, her daughter was over, uh, uh, telling her that, let's see who it is. Her son's husband is going to have their second. The first one I had mentioned in our community with Michael, it was uh, the first one went through some terrible traumas in the hospital, and I asked the men's community to pray for him, and it was a very awkward thing, asking a childless community to pray for a newborn. And I went to Michael first, being the admin, and asked him if it would be okay for me to post this. And he said, sure, absolutely. And I did. And I got surprisingly good results. So I was surprised by how many people. I said, even if you just, I'm trying to remember the exact way I worded it. Even if you just, give the post a thumbs up or something, I know you're thinking. That was a tough thing. That was tough for me. I know it was tough for the parents and all, but back to my point is I found out that they're going to have their second this year, and it's all. I even said to my wife, because I said I'm happy for them. They're a young couple. I am. But it can be heartbreaking at the same time. I grew up, not grew up. Since I've been married to my wife, like I said, both she has a son and daughter. They both had gotten married. They both had two. Now one of them is married and having, it's you see this whole. It's like I can see my wife's her what would you call it, legacy is grow every year. It's multiplying. It's getting bigger and bigger. And mine's like nothing, blank. It's uh, it's hard to deal with sometimes. You see it in a daily thing, living with a person, how theirs is just constantly growing, and well, could be no end to it. It just could go on for years and years. And mine ends with me, I guess, pretty much.
Hey,
Uh,
I just Ken, I want to thank you for what you just said just earlier, because it really hit home to me, like Mother's Days and things like that. And Vicky and I can bunker down in the house and we can just shut the world out. And just listening to you say, I'm getting it at home too. Now I know there's no malice in that. Obviously, but yeah, there's no. I never really thought about it until you said it. That there's no relief. Wow.
no, I mean, I know this isn't an everyday thing, but it's some. I sometimes I go off and go on the computer. I'm into aviation and flight simulations, and sometimes I use that to distract my mind, and because it's a never ending thing. Sometimes you think you leave work, you're going home, you're like, I can go home and just get a break from all this, but you don't.
Yeah.
Genuinely never thought of that before.
No,
That's
I haven't.
absolutely something that I had never appreciated before. That when I go home, that there is an equal level of, there's different levels of obviously pain. I think mine's more than my husband's, and I think sometimes we find that, I think, in communities anyway. But it's the same, isn't it? I mean, we're talking to our guests about being single and going home to an empty house. You sort of realise sometimes some of those privileges that we have going home to somebody and being able, as you say, Michael, to just hunker down and keep the world out. But actually, if that world is within your homes and it breaches the walls, that's really tricky, because the level of grief is different, isn't it? There's a difference in those feelings because of the difference in the circumstances. I hadn't realised. Thank you for sharing that. That's completely different.
Yeah, your home's supposed to be a safe place,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something I've struggled with a lot over the years, because both of my stepchildren at one point or another have lived with us. They have quite difficult relationship with their mum. I won't get into that, and I won't get into that relationship because that's their story, not mine. But so for an example, today, I knew that I was coming onto this podcast. About 10:30, my husband gets a text from my stepdaughter saying, "Oh, Dad, can you come and pick me up?" and my stomach just dropped, and I thought, I can't have her here while I'm doing this. She can't be in the house while I'm talking about her in this way. It's not fair. And it always comes down to logistics. So then husband had to, he's poorly as well, so he had to then go and pick her up from a friend's house, take her to a different friend's house, just so that she wouldn't be subjected to this kind of chat, because she's only 17. She doesn't need this on top of all of her own teenage stuff that she's got going on. But yeah, the whole thing about home being a safe place, I've never felt that home is a safe place, because there's always been, if not the reality, then the potential for the children to just turn up, and often particularly when they were younger, not in a nice way, more in a, there have been so many occasions that it makes me so sad that the children have turned up here with black bags because their mum has kicked them out, and we take them in and we care for them and we do everything we can, and I go to bed at night crying because I would never do that as a mother. I couldn't ever do that as a mother. And yet we just have to pick up the pieces every time. It can be impossible.
It makes those stories as well, that popular myth, doesn't it? Really, really, really hurt. So, if we think as childless people, we get, God, every fairy story, doesn't it, has the childless person in it, and even I'm saying fairy stories, but actually even in popular culture now, there is that whole kind of thing going on. You kind of think, oh yeah, we know who's going to be the villain here, because it's always going to be invariably the childless man or the childless woman. But actually, then throughout history as well, to be judged as being wicked. I think that's kind of the thing. When I look back, I was looking last night about it, just in literature and things like that. As you say, it's a constant kind of thing. And those myths, they hang about, don't they? They haunt us. It kind of like becomes this blueprint for society. And you think, oh, come on, really?
And then you've got the other side of it. So there's a lot, I see a lot on social media of families, particularly in the US, I think, but blended families where you've got, that they're all watching a football game or something, and they've got matching t-shirts and it says bio mum and step mum and dad and stepdad, and it's just like, that's so unrealistic. But on the other end of unrealistic, I can't even be in the same room as their bio mum, let alone wear matching jerseys. It's insane. So the expectations at each end of the spectrum just don't fit reality in my experience at all.
Yeah, we've done there've been some occasions where we had to be together with her ex, and God, were they awkward. That was with some, well, they had a pretty, it wasn't a good divorce that they went through. So she was never looking forward to being in the same room with him either. But I don't know. It's you're looking at this guy and saying, "Well, you got what I never was able to,"
and you don't deserve it.
But yeah. From what she says, how he treated her now, and then of course, if he remarried, and then he had some children with his second wife, and it's like, oh, come on, give me a break, God.
Yeah, I had that too. The ex-wife, actually right in the middle of when we were trying to have a baby, took great pleasure in telling us that she was pregnant, and sent me just absolutely spiraling. It was awful. That child is now 6 years old, and I still feel the unfairness of it. I still feel like I've spent my life working with kids. I was a social worker. I worked in schools. I would have been a great mum. And that woman, she just gets to procreate with wild abandon, with no consideration of what's good, that life is going to be like for that child. There's a lot of anger there, you might recognise.
Understand.
I was going to say, Lisa, that Vicky and I often have a conversation. She gets very, well, both get angry, but she gets very, very angry about seeing, children being neglected. And I don't have to explain that to us here about how that makes us feel. But I'm thinking about your situation in that must be an absolute minefield. And for us, of course, we can be detached from that because we can see it on the television, but there's a certain distance away from that. But for you, living it, man, that must be tough.
Yeah, it's been very tough, particularly when they were younger and they couldn't really think for themselves. They couldn't make the decisions for themselves about what they wanted. But then just to put a positive spin on it, I suppose for these children in particular, I feel like we have had a little bit of an influence. They've come to us now as adults, and in fact, my stepson is seeing a therapist who's sort of helped him understand that his mum's a narcissist, and he sees some of the behaviours that were problematic in his childhood. And I think having us there as the other side of the coin maybe helped him in a way that might not have been the case had I don't want to give myself too much credit, but I was a social worker. I kind of had all the theoretical stuff, so I was able to help my husband see it and understand it. And now that my stepson is older, we have really frank conversations about it, and I feel grateful that I was able to be in his life in that way, because otherwise, yeah, who knows what might have happened if he'd have only had that one parent that was influencing him.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to
Yeah, I've
ask.
kind of had that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was wondering if I could take you both back to a comment early on where you said, Lisa, you've found that there's been more acceptance from the childless community as opposed to that community that are parents. I was wondering if we could sort of. I'm very aware that you're both sort of caretaking for other people's children, and you mentioned that legacy, Ken. What is it, do you feel, about the community that has kind of been more accepting? Because obviously you're triggered, we're triggered, aren't we, by the word parents and seeing other people have that legacy. How is that for you? Because it kind of feels like you've got a foot in both camps, but very much you've been told, actually, no, perhaps you don't have a foot in this camp.
Yeah, I didn't spend too long trying to be involved in the parenting community. It was more to do with, like, I suppose when they were children and I had to do things like understand their homework, stuff like that. But it was just absolute pure rejection. I wasn't a parent. I'd never given birth. I'd never raised a child from baby. So therefore I had absolutely no say. And any kind of attempt I made to be part of that world was completely shut down. Whereas with the childless community, I think we all have, or most of us have, somewhere in the family, aunts, uncles, cousins, somewhere that there's a child that we care about that isn't ours. And I suppose that understanding is what makes the childless community so accepting of it. Because I often think of my relationship with the kids as I'm more like an aunt than anything else. I'm not someone who has a parental. I don't discipline them. I think that might be something that sets it apart. I've never been one to discipline, unless it's like in the moment they were about to put their hand into a fire or something like that. I would never get involved in that. So I see it as more of an auntie or a relationship like that. And the childless community, I think most of us have someone that we recognise that relationship in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, one thing I thought that comes up. Well, I know, like, as a step parent, of course, I have no rights or anything over them. No, I'm an outsider. I'm their mom's husband. That's it. And one thing I've made some kind of journals of my thoughts, feelings, and things. And one thing I've written in there just about a month or so ago is, I hate being called Ken. And and in there I said, not by my friends and not by my coworkers, but by, like, her son and daughter. Like, one of them comes in the door and say, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Ken." That's it's another stabbing in the heart kind of thing, something that yeah, no, you're not my kid. No. And it hurts every time, you're called by your name and not called Dad, or it's more reminders.
I feel that on particularly Mother's Day, I sometimes get little cards or little gifts from the kids, but the card will always say, to someone who's like a parent, or to someone who's very special. The card will never say Mum. And particularly when they were younger, I always questioned whether they were doing it because they wanted to or because my husband had told them to. So it never really felt very authentic. Now more so because they're adults and they're making the choice, and it's very sweet. But yeah, there's always a caveat. It's never just mum, it's stepmum or like a mum or one of those things.
Yeah, I had actually her son uh, did give me a card. It was for my birthday, and it said Happy Birthday, Dad, and which I thanked him for, and I thanked I said later on I had said to his mother, I said it's nice, it's sweet. I think he's trying, but I said that's one thing he will never he'll be able to write it down, but he will never be able to say that to me. Hi, Dad. It's different writing something down and then actually voicing it to someone. And I said that to her. I said, I guarantee he'll never be able to say that.
Ken, out of interest, what do the children's children call you? Do they also call you Ken?
No, they call me Grandpa.
That's nice.
Yeah. And at times when I've been upset, my wife has said to me, she said, you will always be their grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
My wife tries, sometimes she has her ups and downs too. At times she really tries to help me to understand. And then there's other times where she doesn't want to hear it, literally. She even said that to me once. She says, I don't want to hear it, and so it's a roller coaster sometimes, trying to, it's not like I have a bad day where someone at work says something that bothered me. I can go home and sit on the couch and talk to my wife about it. It's not like that.
That's like there's like an manual that's required, isn't there, for like the children involved in this, because must be hellishly complicated for them, but also I guess for your partners as well, because that must be quite complicated for them too. They've got this kind of, I guess, role somewhere in all of this where they're having to navigate themselves, their children. There's a relationship with you too. They're in a very strange place as well. That must be very difficult and trying for all of you in that circumstance. And if there is a complication with the parent, the biological parent of the stepchildren, that too, I've certainly seen it in my family. Without revealing too much, I've been aware of that difficulty and the differences between my upbringing with two parents, two biological parents, and then actually others in my family where there has been a divorce and a step parent has come in. You're kind of just aware of it. You kind of forget it on the surface level, day to day, but occasionally there'll be a blip somewhere. You might go out somewhere and there'll be something might happen, and you think, oh, yeah, my step aunt, though I call her aunt, is kind of having to navigate. You can see her navigating that boundary because something's been crossed in company or at some kind of event or two. And that must be incredibly complex for all of you living under one roof in that circumstance, because the scales that we take for granted, I can confess I've taken for granted, are actually slightly off kilter for you all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even sometimes like her daughter will come over, and well, this is only about 2 weeks ago. She came over and she was sitting on the couch showing her mother some pictures of her grandson, which is of course my wife's great grandson, and this is and that just really made me feel like left out. I just came home from work. She was sitting on the couch showing pictures to my wife and videos and things. I come in, I do not my normal routine. I put my bag inside that I take to work with my lunch and stuff, and I make a cup of coffee. And there's like a 5 minute span, and then I go walking into the living room, my coffee in my hand, and then all of a sudden her daughter saying, "Okay, I'll see you guys later. I love you, Mom. Take care. See you, Ken." And I just like stood there, just walking into the living room, like, what happened here? What? And it was like wasn't going to sit and include me in any of this. Now, at times I'm not even sure if I want to be. I'm on that fence where, yeah, I'm happy for them. They have, she has a grandchild now. Um, but that made me feel really left out, of this whole thing.
Mm.
As you can see, I'm sitting in my car. This right now is my safe place.
Yeah.
So, my internet isn't so too great out here, so I'm using the phone to connect to the internet. It's my first time trying it, so I
Oh
guess it
no,
is working.
it's working like a charm. I can hear you really clearly. So
The
Good, good.
audio sounds quite good from here, to be honest, actually.
So the audio inside the car can is really good because you get no echo. It's all been it's all been sucked up by the the linings in the car. So it's
Yeah, yeah,
sounding good, bruv.
Oh, I might try that myself next time.
yeah. It actually does work very well.
There have been many times where I've gotten in the car because, as you say, that the house is sometimes just not a safe place. So I get in the car and I just go and sit somewhere. Um, and yeah,
Yeah,
that can be quite relaxing when the house is less than.
It's so
yes,
feeling as well. I want to just ask, because if we, with the podcast, we get listened to by obviously the childless community at large, but also occasionally, actually very frequently, by people who are parents. What? Because it sounds to me like there's clearly some pockets here of exclusion within parenting communities and also probably in the childless community too, that we aren't perhaps as universally accepting as perhaps we might think that we are. What can we do what's the message? What can we all do to help and provide support for you? What can we do better as a community? If you're talking, say, to the childless community, but also maybe perhaps parenting communities too. If there was a parent listening who was thinking, okay, yeah, this could be perhaps my friend. What can we all do to make things better for you and to be more inclusive? That's a big question. Sorry, blabbering that one, aren't
yeah.
I? Yeah, what can we make better for you? What's the ideal scenario? How can we welcome you more to this space? Because it feels like it's been, how many episodes of the podcast, Michael, have we done?
I think this is 48, 49.
Something like that. But we haven't talked about this, and we really should have done. This is a real blind spot on our part. Yes, there's lots of topics to talk about, but actually step parenting is a big one, and we could have done this earlier too. It's massive. And clearly there's an awful lot of emotions here that I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, oh God, I'm learning so much from the time that we're spending together. I'm sure that other listeners are as well, as we do with all of our guests. But what can we do better?
I'm wondering whether the terminology of step parent is slightly exclusive, because as soon as you have that word parent, there's an expectation and there's a kind of assumption that I'm doing a parenting job, but I've never felt that. Okay, yeah, sometimes I used to take the kids to school, or I would comfort them and they were crying, but I would do that for a nephew or a niece or a friend's child in exactly the same way. And just because I'm married to their dad doesn't make me their parent. I'm very aware of that. I'm constantly aware of that. And particularly when we talk about, I know in the childless community, it's a big topic of what happens when we're older. And I might say something like that to my husband, and he'll say, well, the kids will look after you. And I say, well, they don't have any, that's not on them at all. They've got enough parents to look after. I don't come under that. Maybe if I'm very lucky, they will. But I could say the same about my nephew in exactly the same way. So I suppose for me, just the assumption that I am in a parenting role is quite hurtful, because I'm not.
Yeah. Uh, what I don't know. Like you say, what could be done? What could people do or say, or in the communities or outside to help? I don't know. I don't know. The childless communities that I belong to three, and they're all amazing people. They they give support. When needed. They're there. I don't know. I'm not sure.
It also is very different depending on, I think, the age that you come into the child's life. Because as you say, Ken, they were adults already. For me, they were sort of primary age children I've got friends who have come into children's lives where they've been very small babies, and that distinction will define your relationship with them, because younger children obviously need a lot more support, and they need more from you, whereas adults not so much. So just within step parenting, and I know I've already poo-pooed that terminology, but just within that, the range is so huge again. It's a minefield, isn't it?
It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah, her kids. Yes, they were both grown. They were living out on their own. I've been to both their marriages when they both got married. Uh, I've all four of her grandchildren each had two. I've been there with their births and growing up and everything, and now one great grandchild and then the second one on the way. Yeah, I've been through there with all that, and that's that. I guess one of the hardest things too was many years ago after her daughter got married and she was pregnant with her first, uh, which is a little story with that too. Just seeing her, when she was pregnant, and then thinking I'll never see my wife like that, her mother, in that supposedly most beautiful time of a woman's life, I've heard it put as. And one thing her daughter said after she got married, before she was pregnant, a couple of months she was married. Came over to the house very upset one day, and I think I might have mentioned this on the men's community, that she very upset. She was crying. She said, "Mom, what's wrong with me?" She says, "Why aren't I getting pregnant?" And the third thing, "What will people think?" And when she said that, I said, "Wow, what will people think?" It is a big social thing of what people say, what people think. That's how your life is judged by if you have kids, how many you have seems to make a difference sometimes in your status level of society in a way. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm really struck by how you, Ken and Lisa, you've been a big part of this family unit's life. You've seen these big landmarks. You've been there when things have gone completely pear-shaped with the biological parents, but there's still this sense that you're not in it. You're sort of sitting on the edge, looking in, watching this almost like this movie play out.
Right. Yeah.
When I mean, I'm sitting here sort of a bit gobsmacked. It's like, well, when do you become part of the family unit, given that you've both had such a huge part of it, if that makes sense? You sat by and watched all of this happen and been part of it. When do you get to be part of that unit?
For me, there's quite a bittersweet element to that, because I often feel the most connected with my stepchildren when they fall out with their biological mum. My stepson in particular has had a very rocky relationship with her, and there are sort of pockets of time where they'll fall out for a few months, and we'll see him regularly. He'll come around sort of almost every day sometimes, and I feel incredibly close to him. I feel very connected. As I said before, I was actually the first one to find out that they were having a baby, but then as soon as that relationship repairs, I'm cast out again, and it's not anything that he's doing intentionally. I'm sure he doesn't even realize it, but for me it's just like, okay, I'll get back in my box, and I want him to have a good relationship with his mum, and it's so difficult because I hate the thought that he has to have a mum who is not everything that she should be. So I try and step in without overstepping, and it's that tightrope again where I'm not quite sure how far to go, and I suppose it is coming a little bit easier as they're growing up, but yeah, I don't know that I'll ever feel that I'm in it, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't really know. Yeah, no, I won't feel that. Yeah, like I'm part of it, a part of the whole thing. I'll always feel like the outsider. Uh, you know, as far as like the grandkids, like my wife, like I said, my wife always says you're always going to be grandpa to them. But I wonder how I don't really know how they think about it. Am I just, they just take it as that fact he's grandpa, or is it, you know, well, he's not really family grandpa. It's not blood. It's not, you know, I, you know, so again, I don't know how they look at it. I guess I can't assume, but no, I'll never really feel part of the whole thing. I'll always feel like that little stand in the background person who's outside looking in.
Ken, it reminds me, and I can cut this out if this is something you don't want to talk about. But it reminds me of the very first email you sent me. That still sits with me even now. How many years later? I've got no idea. But
Yeah,
getting old, so brain's going. But in there, where you talked about you went to an event with your wife, and I think one of the kids, or maybe two of the kids, were there, and they've introduced your wife as, "Oh, this is my mum." Oh, and that's Ken.
yes. Wow,
And
yeah, you do remember that. That's
well, that sat with, because as soon as I read that email, I just walked into Vicky and went, "Well, again, just one of those things that really hits you."
yep.
And yeah, I can cut that out, but yeah, for me, it really drove that exclusion and isolation that you must feel.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Fine, Michael. Yeah, it was, I believe it may have been the daughter's wedding. I'm not sure. Yeah, introducing, I think it was, yeah, her daughter was introducing her and me to some family member or something. I'm not even sure. It might have been a friend, but yeah, hi, this is my mom, and she has a big smile on her face, and oh yeah, the whole thing, and then and this is Ken. And I think I wrote in the thing when I said to you, like, well, who's Ken? Is he the milkman? Is he just someone she grabbed outside the street and said, "Hey, you want to go to a wedding?" And yeah, it's like didn't explain. This is this is my stepfather. This is something. And I guess I have to give her son some credit because he has done the same thing. He not the same, but introducing me to somebody, said, "This is my mother and this is my stepfather." At least he gave me a classification. Which yes, but that's what I am. Yeah, instead of just as Ken, and that is a while ago, Michael. That I said that.
It is,
yeah,
but it was, believe me, brother, it was impactful. It really was.
Yeah, it impacted me that day.
So much about language, isn't it? And it's kind of almost like an unconscious bias by children. They didn't realize they're doing it, but actually, I guess when they're little, they wouldn't know, and they're tiny and language skills are developing, then it's not there. But as they get older, they get that difficult bit when they become aware of things and aware of relationships and language and the complexities as to why perhaps they have this other person who's around, and trying to puzzle all of that out. And I guess that's kind of where sometimes language and unconscious bias can creep in because they're not sure. And I guess that's kind of where the other person, the biological parent, if they're still around, can also create that bias by storytelling. There's so much wrapped up here in language, isn't there?
I mean, like just talking about her daughter introducing me, she didn't mean any malice. She wasn't trying to put me down in any way or anything like that. It was just how the words just came out. No, she didn't think about it probably.
No.
And without thinking, that's just how the words came out of her mouth.
Yeah. And if you weren't around, either of you weren't around, then doubtless, because of all of the hidden things that you do, the things that perhaps they don't realize that you do in providing such structure to their lives, you'd be so very sorely missed. But sometimes there was something I read a while ago on social media about how we don't give praise to the people around us until at their funeral. We should speak to people now and say all the things we want to say to them, and not just leave it until when they're not there to listen. And it feels like there's an awful lot of that in our community, but particularly perhaps with step parenting as well, that to give thanks for the essential role that step parents do. It feels very thankless but actually is incredibly important in the role of what you do for your stepchildren. It's epic, and your step-grandchildren too.
That's such an interesting point, Bernice. My dad died just over a year ago, and I grew up with both my biological parents, so mum and dad were married, etc. But they both had previous families, so all of my siblings are half. Dad had a couple of children, mum had a couple of children, and so all of my siblings understood the step part of that relationship. I never did, and it wasn't until I became a step parent myself that I really started to see it in their eyes. And now I look at my mum and the way she behaved when we were younger, and I look at my dad and I just think, wow, you had all of this and you took it on and you ran with it. And so like my sister's children would call my dad grandpa, even though he wasn't biologically. And it's just this whole other world that as a child, I didn't see it at all. I was completely oblivious. But as soon as I became that person myself, I started to see, and interestingly, I started to see the things I didn't want to be. So there's some difficult relationships in my family on my mum's side, and my mum as a step parent, and I just feel so strongly that I don't want to make the same mistakes. But it's impossible because you just don't know what's coming. You don't know what's coming from your left, right, and it can just be all over the place. But yeah, I think when my dad died, there was a lot of the step part of that became very, very stark, and the way the children responded to his death was very different depending on whether they were his children or his stepchildren. And that scares me because I feel like, is that going to be me? Am I just going to be forgotten because I'm not the mum? One day when I'm gone, is my existence just going to be forgotten? Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, that's true. I thought, yeah, like you just said just then, am I going to be forgotten? And I felt the same thing for me about me. I feel, well, their mother, of course, there's going to be all kinds of memories and up times, bad times, with them, but it's their mother. I mean, Jesus, not much more you can say than that. But yeah, me, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I know I know sometimes step parents do make a great influence on the stepchildren's lives, and I think it was her son's wife had a stepfather, and who she loved, the guy, and her father, her biological father, she couldn't give 2 cents for. She didn't want to ever hear from the guy again. I don't know all the details, but she loved her stepfather, and I'd met him too, and he was a great guy, a funny guy.
You hear about that a lot, don't you? Where and particularly when it's a stepfather who's kind of stepped in the very early part of the child's life, and they've come along and they get to be dad, and so that child then sees that person as their dad. But I don't know, that I think when it's a woman, it's completely different, because even if my if the kid's bio mum wasn't around, I don't think I could ever slip into that position of being the mum, because there's a different societal expectation of it. And the idea that a mum wouldn't be around for her children is absolutely horrifying to many people. But when you think about a dad who's just sort of done a runner or whatever, that is accepted by society. They go, okay, yeah, men do that and it's fine because this other person's just stepped in and become dad. But a woman can't do that. And I don't know that I'd want to be honest, because that just brings a whole another level of pain and what have you. Yeah, I'm not sure what my point was there. Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent.
It's interesting, isn't it? There is that, you're quite right, Lisa, there is that kind of difference, I think, between genders as well, stepfather, stepmother. But also I think what the biological parent is, society says that they're able to do or not able to do, what's acceptable as well, and where those roles fall. It's
have to stay in our lane. That's something that I came across a lot.
Stay in the lane. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, this is what we expect you to do, but actually we said this so many times on the podcast, that what's normal anyway. If you think about, we we have to sort of reset that word family. By talking, we are resetting the word and changing the landscape. But with this episode, taking this up and saying, okay, well, Mother's Day doesn't look like this for a lot of people, an awful lot of people. And actually, it doesn't look the same, from the point of view, again, as you say, Ken, Mother's Day impacts on the family around it, impacts on you too. It doesn't just, happen to the mother. It's the one telling thing that I've taken from this is you've both mentioned separately how your partner's reactions are to certain things with their children and how you feel you can't give that same sense of joy because of childlessness and that exclusion too. It is an absolute minefield, isn't it? All of this language. And
I was going to say, I mean, how do you stay in your lane when it's not defined?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like,
there's no rules here, are there?
there's no manual.
But somehow you have to carry the weight of rules or expectations that nobody's really created for you or the children in all of this as well. I mean, crikey. Yeah.
You talk about Mother's Day and stuff. Mother's Day and Father's Day are two big holidays for us, and unfortunately, but with me, Mother's Day is a worse experience than the Father's Day, because on Mother's Day, that's when they'll call her and they'll come over and bring a gift and things, and there's more of a big deal made out of it than of course with me on Father's Day. On Father's Day, I usually never hear from the daughter. The son tries. I bet he does. He'll text me, Happy Father's Day, and he has. I think it was 2 years ago. He came over with a card. Or was it last year? With a card and everything. I was saying, he, where he called me, happy his father and stuff. But I think Mother's Day is probably worse for me than Father's Day, actually.
Sometimes I think on Mother's Day, I feel a little bit like, well, they're going to go and see their mum. So actually, maybe I can have a bit of respite. I can have a bit of peace, because I know that I'm not going to have to acknowledge the day even. I can just go off into my little bubble and not worry about it because I know that they're with their mum and that's the priority. But then occasionally they'll turn up here and have a card or a box of chocolates for me, and I just find it excruciating because I don't know how to respond to that. I'm equally over the moon. I'm so happy that they thought of me, and I feel really grateful for that, but also it's just a big fat slap in the face and a reminder that I was a secondary consideration, and that's how it should be. And it's just all those emotions that just swirl around all the time.
Because like you said, it was later on in the day when they would, it's like you feel like you were a secondary or the last thought. Well, we better go do something or say something to her. I understand that. I felt the same way. On Father's Day, I know they're going to go see their father, of course, and things like that, and like you say, you'll get maybe 8 o'clock at night a text, gee, thanks for thinking of me. I don't know. Yeah, you do feel like
But you don't want to seem ungrateful because it is a very sweet thing to do if they do turn up
of course
later on at night. So you have to put on the face, the smile, and you say thank you and you give them a hug and then just go and cry.
Right, and inside you're crying. Yeah.
Thank you so very, very much. Just thank you for your heartfelt honesty in talking about this. I'm sure it must be bringing out lots of emotions for you both this morning and joining us here. But just it's so educational and so informative, and I feel like I have learned so much in the hour we've been together. I can't thank you enough for that. And I know that obviously you're conscious you've got your family around you as well, and they're there, and that's obviously difficult to talk about that and feel keep them safe too. So thank you. Just very honoured that you've done that for us today.
You know, one thing that was amazing for me today, which I really appreciate, was talking to another step parent and
Yes, I
and
agree.
Yes.
you know listening to that. I thought that was terrific. I've never had it, you know, and it was nice. It's to talk to somebody that you know understands what you're thinking and feeling, and you understand them. You know, their difficulties that are outside some of the other childless people's feelings and things. You know,
We get that a lot on the
it was
podcast.
nice.
Yeah. Stay in touch, both of you, with each other.
I
You
enjoyed
should.
that.
We do have that quite often. We have lots of our guests who've never met each other before. We bring them together on the podcast and they stay in touch, and that it's lovely. We feel like we're like a little friendship bank, or something.
I actually think
Friendship.
that's such an important point. You know, the fact that we've been asked about this topic
Yeah.
so often suggests that there's a real need for it out there to kind of, I guess, normalize your experiences. Because as you say, it sounds quite, I'll be honest, it sounds quite lonely because it's such an unusual. I say it's unusual, but it's kind of you're not in this camp, you're not in this camp. You've got a foot in both. Where do I sit?
Yeah,
So
and it
Right.
leaves you feeling unbalanced just in general
Yeah.
because you can't quite settle anywhere. And I think for me, what's important, the reason I wanted to do this podcast so much is because, I mean, 5, 6 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to sit here and talk the way I have done. But now I'm sort of 10 years into being a step parent. And actually, I look back at where I was 10 years ago, and there are so many people coming into it at that point. And I just want them to know that it does actually get better. And everyone says it's going to get better. And the kids will see what's going on. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. But actually, what will get better is you'll find it easier to navigate. You'll figure it out. And you'll get to a point where it doesn't feel like your heart's being ripped out every 5 minutes, and that for me is what
Yeah.
was important to get across.
Yeah.
But having people around you to have a conversation and to meet other step parents would probably be a huge, important part of that. And that's something that we three perhaps need to go away, or well, not perhaps, we will go away and think about, because it feels like there's a gap somewhere that perhaps we could facilitate for you, where we could provide that form of communication or network or something. And definitely we will definitely think seriously about what we can do to provide somewhere for that, because it matters so much that there is bringing together and you've got someone to talk to, because like Sarah says, it sounds incredibly lonely, and that's not right. It's all about having a conversation. If full stop can help, then we will.
Yeah. Thank you both. Really genuinely heartfelt thank you. It's been a real eye opener for me. So thank you.
Yeah, and just lovely
yeah,
to
I
see you
enjoy.
both again. It's so lovely, Ken. We haven't spoken for so long. And Lisa, you've been on my mind so often. It's just lovely to have you here, Annie. It really is. Just such a
Thank
long
you.
time.
It's been nice to be back, even though
Yeah.
my voice is struggling a little bit now. I'm gonna have to go and drink lots of
It
water.
probably is now, but you sounded very, very dulcet and good.
No, I'd like to just repeat what the two, Berenice and Sarah, have just said, and thank you for your courage, Ken. We've spoken in the past. I know this is difficult for you, so thank you for being here today, and thank you both for really giving us that. I'm going to call it a slap in the face in terms of what it's like to be a step parent, because I never imagined some of the things you've said today. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. I really did, and seeing all you guys again. It's been a while.
It
It
has.
has.
And the other thing I appreciate so much is that right now we're talking from opposite sides of the world, basically. I mean, well, I got the UK in the middle, and then I'm in the east side. Michael, he's literally on the other side of the world from me.
We
It's
get
amazing.
very excited about this too, Ken. We get quite like, it's cross continent. It makes us all very excited.
Yeah.
I have to say, it feels like it's the power of a podcast, and it's the power of the and gosh, it's just amazing and wonderful. I love it. We all love it very much. Yeah.
I always get it. Yeah, it always hits me how God, I've talked to people, from Australia, from the UK, from Africa, and all over the world.
Yeah. And
It's
often people
amazing.
find that we're really good friends as well. So like my husband will go out with his mates and they go off down the pub or something. He's just like, we don't really see your friends. And I do, but they're just in different countries. Like, they're there. I know they're there and we chat often, but well, Sarah, to be fair, and you're not, but yeah.
Different countries, different continents. Yeah.
But still.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found Ken and Lisa's conversation as touchingly honest as we did. We'd love to hear from you if you were equally affected by Ken and Lisa's stories. If you'd like to find out more about our podcast, or you have a great idea for a topic we've not covered, or you just want more of something, we'd love to hear from you. We want this podcast to have as many voices from across our community as possible. So if something's missing, or you just want a deeper dive on it, let us know. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn, and we have a YouTube channel now too, along with our own website at www.thefullstoppod.com. You can sign up to our listeners list at the website, which keeps you up to date on what we're up to. And if you'd like to, you can also donate to our work too. But as ever, as Mike always says, you're not alone.